Fox, it's a showdown for the ages as Aaron Rodgers leads the undefeated Packers against Tom Brady and the Bucs. It all kicks off Sunday on Fox and the Fox Sports app. Check local listings for the game in your area. Terry Bradshaw is putting $1 million up for grabs in this week's free-to-play Super 6 contest. All you have to do is correctly predict the outcome of 6 NFL games. Make sure you get your picks in before kickoff Sunday for your chance to be a millionaire. And for top stories, scores, and more, go to the Fox Sports app. Colin, Bears-Panthers is one of the matchups this week. Give us your winner and final score.
Well, there's a reason it's not on my Blazing Five. I think that's a hard game to handicap. Generally, if you give a good coach a few extra days to prepare, Matt Nagy's a good coach, couple extra days to prepare, I would probably say Chicago close. But I'll tell you, Matt Rule and that staff, Carolina gets better every Sunday.
They're looking good.
They've done a great job. I should have stuck with my initial prediction, which is I think Carolina's going to be the shock team, and then I bailed on it. I've got no courage. They've really played well last couple of weeks. Jimmy Johnson's got all sorts of courage. 2 Super Bowls, one of the best football coaches in the history of this country, college football national championship, Miami. He's now Fox Sports analyst, obviously, joining us live from the Keys in Florida. So, Jimmy, the worst situation for a coach is you lose your starting quarterback and you got to go to a backup. But I said this in the offseason. I thought Andy Dalton was a good pickup. He's a grown-up. He's from Texas. He's all in on the Cowboys. Would you, if you ran the Cowboys, would you lighten it up? Would you simplify it for him? Would you some of their skills are similar. Dak's, I think, a little better athlete. What do you do with a playbook now for Dalton?
Yeah, Colin, I think you adjusted a little bit, but I felt like they needed to adjust it even when Dak was in there. They needed to do some things to protect that defense. That defense is really struggling. They went from a 4-3 to a 3-4, and half the players really don't know what they're doing. And so the defense has struggled. And so how you protect the defense is you eliminate the negative plays and you increase your time of possession by running the football with Ezekiel Elliott. Now, I think Dalton, he'll be a perfect fit. In fact, he will help that defense. As long as he manages the game and utilizes that supporting cast, I think that they shouldn't miss a beat. And plus, they're in the NFC East. If you were the quarterback for the Cowboys, you'd win the NFC East. So I think they're in good shape.
So Le'Veon Bell got picked up by the Chiefs. When you were coaching and you get a player, and Le'Veon may not be what he was 5 years ago, but he's got a skill set. Jimmy, he can catch the ball. This is a pretty good O-line. How much do you integrate him into the offense first week, second week, third week? Because he's a nice little red zone asset here. Would you slowly move him into the offense?
Bell has been in the league long enough that he's going to be able to adjust to whatever Andy wants him to do. And who's the best coach in the entire league as far as utilizing his talent? And it's Andy Reid. Bell, like you say, he's an outstanding receiver. You can split him out. You can do a lot of different things with him. Now, he's not going to be able to play in that first ball game, but by the time he gets into the second ball game, into like a week and a half or so, they'll have a package for Bell, and I think he'll do fine. I think, in fact, he'll do a lot better for them than what he was doing for the Jets, and it could be similar to what he was doing there with the Steelers.
So Packers-Bucks is the biggest game of the day. And the one reason I like Green Bay in this game, one of the reasons I like it, I think they're doing such a good job protecting Aaron Rodgers. He's not getting sacked. He's got that extra beat, that extra 3/4 of a second. And Tom's offensive line has been heavily penalized, and it just looks like they're a little out of sync. Now, Chris Godwin's supposed to play this week, and so he's fully practiced. So are you disappointed, or is Tampa offensively kind of where, Jimmy, you thought they'd be with no preseason?
I actually thought Tampa would be better than what they're playing right now. I think Brady is frustrated. He's not converting on third down, but most of his third downs are third down and 8, third down and 9.
Right.
They're a sloppy football team. I've said for the last couple of years before Brady got there, I said Tampa was the most exciting bad team in the league. Here they led the league in offense, but they were horrible. They turned the ball over too much, made too many mistakes. Now, Brady has elevated them. They're better now, But, they still are a sloppy football team. Too many penalties, too many negative plays, too many third and longs. I just see, the Packers being a better coach team right now.
Yeah.
Now, I will say this. I like their defensive coach. I think defensively, they really do a heck of a job.
Yeah, I like Todd Bowles, too. I think he's as good a coordinator right now as the league has. Pro Football Hall of Famer Jimmy Johnson. It's interesting, Brady comes from that sort of academic, rigid system in New England. Very intense. And Tampa's always been a little loose, and Bruce Arians a little loose, and Tom's yelling at teammates about 10 days ago, and it made a lot of news. I mean, Troy Aikman, you had him. He'd bark at guys. Dan Marino would bark at guys. I do worry a little bit that it's a young roster. Tom's an older player, and he's losing patience. Should I at all be worried that it got a little testy and talked about a little too long when he barked last week?
Troy didn't bark until after I left. Because he knew Barry wasn't going to bark, and and somebody needed to bark at those players. I think just looking at Tom, he looks frustrated. He looks, like. In fact, he made the comment after the ball game that so many 3rd and 8s, it's hard to convert, and so they are a talented enough team that they can win against anybody if things fall right for them. But because they're a sloppy team, they're not going to have the consistency of a champion.
Yeah.
And until they get that consistency, I'm going to be concerned about them.
Yeah. It's interesting. I love Andy Reid, but there is something. Mahomes is facing more zone coverage this year, and he's struggling a little bit with it. He's struggling, and they've gotten into a bad habit of starting slow. And I think to myself, well, Andy Reid's a great play designer. Maybe he feels the game out. Pete Carroll can get into this, where Pete lets the game, he feels it out, and then he's a terrific halftime adjuster. Go back to your career. Did you ever have a team like the Chiefs that could start slow, and you always felt like you were digging out of a hole a little bit? And how do you correct it if that ever becomes the case?
I think Kansas City falls into the category of having success and maybe not being quite as hungry before they had the success. The biggest enemy of great is good. And they are very, very good. Now, when you're bad, you put in the extra hours and you do whatever it takes to try to achieve, success. But they've had so much success, it's almost like they're taking things for granted.
Yeah.
I know Terry Bradshaw asked me, he said, you were a complete, SOB to those players, after that first Super Bowl. I said, yeah, and I was a bigger one the second Super Bowl. He said, if you'd have stayed with that veteran, you'd have lightened up, wouldn't you? I said, no, I would have been an even bigger one. You gotta push those players. The more success they have, the harder it is to push them, to get to that pinnacle.
So I have to ask you, every coach has a strength. You had an eye for personnel that is second to none. You were an unbelievable recruiter, and you built a power at Miami, and it wasn't all 5-star guys. It wasn't when you first got there. You built a power with some 3-star guys. And I have to ask you, if the Jets or the Giants got the #1 pick, and Trevor Lawrence is sitting out there, you're the GM of one of those teams. Do you move off a Jones or a Darnold this quickly? What do you do, Terry? Because I think that's what's going to happen here. The Jets are a bad football team.
They are a bad football team, but you don't pass on a great quarterback. If you're going to have the first pick in the draft, that means you're going to have the first pick in the second round as well, and the third and the fourth. And so you take your Trevor Lawrence, and then you maybe trade some other picks to try to build your team. But you don't ever bypass on a franchise outstanding quarterback like Trevor Lawrence.
Okay. And Aikman was like that, right? You with Troy Aikman, you felt you were getting.
Well, I felt that way. We had scouts that wanted to take Tony Mandridge. I mean, people have selective amnesia. Right now, everybody says, oh, for sure we're going to take Troy Aikman. Troy didn't even make all Pac-10. Rodney Peete was an all Pac-10 quarterback.
Wow. So
there were questions. There were questions on Troy. Now, there were no questions on my mind. I'd been recruiting Troy ever since he was a sophomore in high school. He was in my, when he was a sophomore in high school, he came to my camp at Oklahoma State. We thought we had him signed at Oklahoma State, and then at the last weekend, he goes to Oklahoma. So I'd been working on Troy for a long time. I knew he was going to be our guy. But, if you look back, during that period of time, there were a bunch of other players that were questioned whether or not, they could be the #1 pick. A lot of people wanted Mandridge.
Do you fire those scouts who wanted Mandridge?
To protect them, I wouldn't mention their name now.
I don't blame you. By the way, one college football question. So Nick Saban will not coach the game because he got COVID. Now, he was at Zoom practices. And it was so interesting,
Right.
so interesting to me that even though he's got Steve Sarkisian, who's been a head coach twice, and he's got his defense installed for 10, 15 years, the line moved a field goal, and I'm like, holy moly. Jimmy, when you were in a game, where would you have been missed as a head coach? What does a head coach do? Is it the halftime adjustment maybe that a coordinator couldn't do?
Well, I think the head coach, really in college and pro, his biggest impact is on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. It's during the week in preparing for the ball game. That's his biggest impact. The head coach on game day, some head coaches call plays, which I don't agree with. Some coaches call defense. I don't agree with that either. Now, it's more, I think he has more impact in professional football. In college football, if you're at one of those top 10 schools, it's kind of like I said with you, you could be the quarterback for Dallas and you can still win the NFC East. If you're at Alabama, and you were the head coach, you're still going to be right there winning 10 or 11 ball games.
Yeah. You never called plays once in your career. Even your first year at Oklahoma State.
Actually, I called plays. I called defenses 3 or 4 years. I called offensive plays for 2 years at Oklahoma State. In fact, Ernest Anderson led the nation in rushing the year that I called plays at Oklahoma State.
Why'd you give it up?
I don't think that's the way to do it. I think you're a better head coach if you can delegate, you can oversee, you can have your hand in the offense, defense, and special teams. I spent more time. I was in all the special teams meetings. I would pop in and out of the offensive and defensive meetings. I would sit in all the defensive meetings in preparing the game plan. And so, if you are wrapped up, an offensive coordinator, his mindset is, score. He doesn't talk about, managing the game, timeouts, working the clock. He just wants to score. The defensive coordinator just wants to stop him. He doesn't care about working the clock. The head coach has got to manage the game. He's got to tell the offensive coordinator, hey, start running the ball more. He's got to tell the defensive coordinator, blitz, hey, we can't give them any yardage here. He's got to tell the special teams coach, hey, we're going to run a fake punt, if they don't make it this time. I want the head coach to manage the game, and manage, clock management. I see games lost, Colin, every single weekend where the head coach did not manage the clock.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah. Boy, you gave Dave Wannstedt all that responsibility. Boy, that's a lot of responsibility to give Dave.
He was with me for about 20 years, so he knew what I wanted to get done.
The Hall of Famer, Jimmy Johnson. Great seeing you, Coach.
Okay, Colin.
Thank you so much. Never learned more football than I have from Jimmy Johnson. Super smart guy. Joy Taylor with the news.
No.